Well, hello, that's me again. Today is January 28th. It is the end of the weekend for some. This is morning in the Seattle, and I will start with something which you probably wouldn't expect from me, but actually it has everything to do with what is going on right now. And as I already stated, I am kind of reluctant always to give these C-traps, and tactical minutia. Somebody did this and somebody moved to 500 meters to, inside the territory of the enemy. So it's important, make no mistakes, but it is. But we'll start with this. And I think so. It's about time, and here it is. CNN reports, actually 2 days ago, 3 days ago, that news industry off to brutal 2024 start as mass layoff devastate publishers, raising questions about the future of journalism. And it's by some Oliver Darcy, but the question is that I think so. The future of journalism is bright, as long as the journalist departments in all those American and Western universities, and I would say I would cut a bunch of them in Russian universities too, are annihilated completely, that would be great. Because guess what? He is talking about journalism, which is nothing more than propaganda machine of the so-called, which is wrong, it's misnomer, it's not left, it's liberal, in the United States, which means basically primarily Democratic National Committee, and obviously there are all those five, there are all three-letter agencies, each of whom have their basically own, media outlets, be that New York Times, be that, Washington Post, or for that matter, Wall Street Journal, which is nominal right, but in the same time, the same thing as the, just basically neoliberalism. So it's good. Let them die. I don't think so. CNN being itself the, just basically spreader of the propaganda, have the right to exist. And I think it's that it is a very positive development. And honestly, I don't have any sympathy to those people. Now, as I already on the record, there are no normal people working there, especially in the hierarchy of those media. Those people have no morals, they have no principles, they are brainwashed, and in the end they're downright stupid, because this is basically a fundamental requirement for being a journalist today in the Western media. And so let them go. There are many good, great actually journalists today in the alternative media, be them alternative left, be them alternative right, what have you. And I mean, it's good, it's good. The propaganda machine has to die, and those people who have been basically brainwashed and dedicated part of their so-called professional life, again, you have to understand what journalism is. It's just glorified English language degree. That's what it is. There's nothing more to it. I mean, they learn absolutely nothing there. And as Mr. What's his name, Stalpart, I believe, he said that if you want to, he was dramaturgist, and still is dramaturgist and journalist from United Kingdom. He said that, yeah, if you want to change the life of the world, journalism is the best tool. So as you can see yourself, they were not reporting the world, they were changing it, and they changed it into the utter disaster. And we're talking about in moral sense, because they promoted the most, despicable issues, and I don't know what percent of pedophiles works there, but many, if across the board there. So there you go. And that brings us to a very strange thing, which I was actually surprised to read, because it was one of those things which is not American journalism, which is a euphemism for propaganda, war crimes, pedophilia, and things of this nature. But suddenly I read almost 99% honest reporting, just reporting. Look at this. And this is extremely important, because how can I say this? Wow, I thought they would not report it, but guess what? This is Associated Press, and then this is ABC News. And look at this. When you read this, it's, this is how journalism is supposed to be. They write about the important events of yesterday. Russia marks 80 years since breaking the Nazi siege of Leningrad. The Russian city of St. Petersburg has marked the 80th anniversary of the end of a nearly 900-day siege by Nazi forces. And the Russian city of St. Petersburg, which is Leningrad, on Saturday marked this, and with a series of memorial events attended by Russian President Vladimir Putin and close allies. Look at this, close allies, no dictators, no nothing that Lukashenko, who was there, was some kind of dictator or some undemocratic dude. And guess what? They continue to basically report on this. The Kremlin leader laid flowers at a monument to fallen Soviet defenders of the city, then called Leningrad, on the banks of the Neva River, and then at Piskaryovskaya cemetery, where hundreds of thousands of siege victims are buried. Wow, you read this and it's like, wow, they just report things. How interesting. But then we have, of course, the situation which is actually written by, how to put it, Mr. Bhadra Kumar from India, you know, the Indian Indian diplomat, and you would say, why should he state anything about this? But he does, and he does it in the most profound way. And he writes about this a couple weeks ago, and he called the title of this an anniversary West would rather forget. An epochal anniversary from the annals of modern history is coming up. It was a couple of weeks ago. It was marked yesterday. In another 10 days, that remains a living memory for the Russian people. The siege of Leningrad, arguably the most gruesome episode of the Second World War, which lasted for 900 days, was finally broken by the Soviet Red Army on the 27th January 1944. And he continues elaborate on this. The siege, endured by more than 3 million people, of whom nearly one half died, most of them in the first 6 months, when the temperature fell to 30 below 0 Celsius. It was an apocalyptic event. And he writes about it. The epic siege of Leningrad was the longest endured by any city since biblical times. And equally, citizens became heroes, artists, musicians, writers, soldiers, and sailors who stubbornly resisted the iron from entering their souls. And he describes it, and he explains the reasons why the combined West doesn't want to remember this. I'll give you an example. There are more civilians buried on the Piskaryov cemetery, one of major cemetery, which is also a memorial, which is actually more than pretty much all KIAs by the United States Army in the World War II on both theaters. And in terms of 1.5 million, more than 1.5 million of people suffocated by Nazi Germany during this siege, it's more than all victims of all wars of the United States ever conducted combined. And one of the major reasons why the West doesn't want to remember this, although you know what, surprisingly they reported on this, is the fact that it gives you proper perspective on the amount of sacrifice and actually the scale of it, which obviously puts immediately, and I will explain to you right now, the whole idea of the Western allies entering the European theater and just winning the war. They didn't. It was the Red Army which primarily bore the brunt of it, and Soviet civilians. And here comes the most important thing, which finally happened. Why it is finally happened, I will explain. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko and other people who have been present there, they opened the long overdue memorial to the genocide, dedicated to the genocide of Soviet people. This is a magnificent, actually, monument, as you can see yourself, with the eternal flame. And this is how it looks from the outside. And inside the stela, you have actually 150 actual people. These are actual people, they are portraits who have been killed by Nazi Germany and Nazi Axis forces in Soviet Union, of all different nationalities, but primarily, of course, Russians, due to Russians being a majority population of the Soviet Union. These are actual people who have been killed. And do you know the number of those people killed? at least 16 million Soviet civilians died as the result of the Nazi invasion into the Soviet Union. Now here comes this most important part. No American serviceman ever had to experience this, because you go to war to kill some guys in sandals in, turbans with the whatever AK-47, but your family is fine. America is fine. It hasn't been bombed. It actually thrived. And then they say, yeah, the stolen valor issue. They come in and say, yeah, we defeated Germans, we defeated this Wehrmacht thing. And then, of course, they import through paperclip all those Wehrmacht generals who write them basically the foundation of the American military science and the fighting doctrine, the guys who lost the war, no less. And suddenly, how do you go about this? Because obviously pretty much everything in America as a whole knows about Soviet Union and Russia is based on the what? Stalin's genocide. Correct. They think that Stalin killed tens of millions of people because, well, it's the history of the Soviet Union written by propagandists. The same as, for example, Mr. Solzhenitsyn. Forget about Solzhenitsyn being a very mediocre writer. But the fact that he is basically now openly stated being the CIA project, and the guy, those who haven't read him in Russian, they better just reserve their opinions about his writing. He's unreadable in Russian. But guess what? He confabulated, including the use of the people who were Nazi collaborators, with the statistics about this whole thing, and guess what? This is what they operate with. Well, in reality, the Gulag, while did exist, while there were crimes committed, while there were many people who died during the Civil War, but Gulag, it wasn't nothing like it was described by Solzhenitsyn, or for that matter, even the great Gulag writer, truly great writer, Varlam Shalamov. It was a large organization, but there were no millions of people there. And when you suddenly begin to finally cross that river, this Rubicon, stating that, no, Stalin didn't genocide people. Soviets and Bolsheviks didn't genocide their own people. They committed some crimes, definitely, which have to be, and they are and were being studied and basically, reviewed from the criminal law point of view. But you know what? Suddenly you say, no, this were actually genocide by the combined West, Europe, which killed the insane number of the innocent civilians in the Soviet Union. And this is the fact of life. And finally, it has been established, including into the memorial, which will be attended, has already been attended by millions upon millions of Russian people. It's about time, and the red line in this respect has finally been crossed, and it will bury all this what is called Russian reformers, which are pretty much have been operating on their cues from their Western masters in 1990s, who genocided truly. More than 5 million Russian people died as the result of the reforms in 1990s. So West has been responsible for a genocide of Russia twice in the 20th century. And this is the fact which Russians will never forget now. And after that, those who want to read this garbage by Solzhenitsyn or whatever other dissidents who have been basically writing their numbers pulled out of their own, pardon my French, asses, well, sure, go right ahead. It's your loss. And obviously you will not find anything reported by those people from the US media or Western media in general, because they're not journalists, they're not reporters. They are propagandists and ideologues who brainwashed West into utter submission and a catastrophe which is unfolding in front of our eyes, and we can all observe it. And as the result of this, let me show you. American Conservative Magazine suddenly asks, and they asked it yesterday, 2 days ago, and they talk about, are there any living American statesmen? and they talk about the book, so by, again, some kind of book by some kind of scholar who has degree in whatever, which has nothing to do with the real life, and the book is called Gateway to Statesmanship, Selections from Xenophon to Churchill. You know what? It's becoming nauseating when they go back and they begin to read Aristotle, Xenophon, and all these classic Western civilization thinkers, which is great. I mean, make no mistake, I am not against it. But can we stop now, actually, and applying the Xenophon or even Churchill's wisdoms? However, the guy was the whole article on its own, and admit to the fact they do apply very little to the modern statesmanship because it requires a completely different set of the skills and basically knowledge, which of course Xenophon or Aristotle couldn't even conceive. But so, and he said, the West secondary schools and universities, he wrote, remain very good at educating activists and technicians. They have wandered from their mission of forming citizens, among them potential statesmen. And let me show you what I wrote 6 years ago. Remember this book, okay? No, American schools are not good. Pardon me, it's just basically the fact of life, including the whatever they mean, the technician they mean. So, but here it is, at the page 202 of the thing which I wrote, 7 years ago, basically. And here it is. Against such a background, it is difficult to see how this trust and mutual respect can be restored. US elites have simply stopped producing any truly competent people. The US stopped producing real statesmen, not just politicians even earlier, when experts fail as they failed America, not least due to many of them not being real experts at all. Actors, comedians, sportsmen, conspiracy theorists, and demagogues from the mass media take their place. Well, we now have the one thing which is basically we're observing, and finally they're laying off. And again, if CNN or Bloomberg will disappear tomorrow, nobody will notice because they spread garbage basically. And the same goes for pretty much most, and some people write to me, oh, don't use the very broad brush, to paint all of us like this. No, I don't use, but what I'm saying, for example, remove journalist departments, for example, or communications departments from the humanities programs in the US universities, nobody will notice because they produce no value. And guess what? You can begin with the issue of what basically it's all about. United States doesn't produce journalists unless they are exceptions to the rule, and United States and combined West doesn't produce statesmen. The United States today has no statesmen. Period. There are none of them. The only thing they have are the politicians whose only skill is in re-electing themselves. And that's why, for example, when you look at the totally rotten to the core and perverted American so-called journalism, corporate journalism, as I already stated, those people do not operate on the foundation, basically, of achieving things except for being re-elected. Ask for the record of any of them, with some very few exceptions. What bill did they pass? What type of the qualities and skills they performed at the statement? Well, statement, what is statement? It's the man of principles. Because you have to be the man of principles, and you have to actually understand what your nation wants and what has to be done. Obviously considering the fact, as it is always with any politics, staying within the political discourse of your time. You have to maintain the power. The problem is, look at the US Congress or look at Joe Biden or Obama. These are incompetent people. They are there to enrich themselves. And when you look across the whole political spectrum of the United States today, sorry to say it, that's why we have this issue. There are no statesmen, there are no real generals in the US Army, for example, and there are no real statesmen. They do not work for the interest of their country. US Congress practically is owned by the Israel and its American Israel Public Relations Committee, Public Action Committee, AIPAC. So What kind of statesman are you talking about? I mean, Joe Biden, we know the whole story now. It's in the open. Obama was the community organizer. Well, he wasn't. Well, yeah. Those are people who have absolutely no qualities to lead the nation to some fundamental end, which preserves the nation. And then, of course, we look at now what is called American nation. My gosh, read my last book, Disintegration. We are looking at the process, however soft, of this disintegration. And why it is happening? Because there are no statesmen. The Ivy League of the United States, it's a joke. I mean, it's literally a joke. Harvard, Yale, I mean, come on, the faculties which produce, departments which produce lawyers, yeah, sure. And there you go. And now you have the scandals of even the medical school in Harvard is being actually accused of the plagiarism and absolutely just basically faking the results of the studies. There you go. What do you need more? And there you go. So let this media, let this whole system, which basically drives the nation, or whatever is left, the remnants of the American nation, into the ground, let it go. Let new people come up. Let real journalists, real politicians, real statesmen finally emerge, because this is what America is facing if it wants to preserve itself as the nation. If not, it is the disintegration and the collapse. And here is the other thing, which of course we need to look at it, and this is just tells you to what degree of desperation and stupidity we're looking at. Washington Post 2 days ago, and they talk about, yes, war plans for Ukraine don't foresee retaking lost territory. Okay, let me put it this way immediately. United States cannot do military plans, okay, period. And they, you know what, they just admitted, and this Biden administration is working on the long-term strategy for supporting Kyiv. Again, as I already stated, there are no single person in Pentagon or in establishment who know what strategy is and how states' strategy, the strategy of the highest level of the government, of the nation, correlates and interacts with the military strategy. They have no clue. None of them. Give me the best, whatever, the guy who will be dropping quotes from Clausewitz, you know, Sun Tzu, and all those things, you know, in front of me. None of them. None. Zero. Including top-notch, you know, the DOD specialists understand how it works, because United States operates as corporation. It stopped operating as the nation. So they don't have no clue. They have a lot of, obviously, quotes from all kind of the strategic wisdoms of the past. You saw results of it. And so here it is. Still smarting from the last year's failed counteroffensive in Ukraine, the Biden administration is putting together a new strategy that will de-emphasize winning back territory. Well, you have to explain, basically, people starting from the U.S. Military Academy in West Point to the Command and General Staff College in Leavenworth, Kansas, that actually victory, yes, it's not about just territory. Very often victory is, well, not very often, it's the only part of it, is not to run some number of kilometers or capture some, area or some territory. It is primarily about compelling the enemy to do our will, quoting Clausewitz. And it has nothing to do with those purely geometric assessments of the warfare. It is about compelling the enemy by means of distracting it, inflicting such a pain that it will be compelled to do our will. But again, as I already stated, there are no people of the real strategy there. So, and guess what? WAPO continues to elaborate, Washington Post. The idea is now to position Ukraine to hold its position on the battlefield for now, but put them on a different trajectory to be much stronger. But the end of 2024 and get them on a more sustainable path. So as you can see yourself, a lot of words, meaningless. They contain no, basically any meaning, no sense. The semantics of it is classic American and Western journalist BS. Said the senior official, one of several who described the internal policy maker making on the conditions of anonymity. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, but look at this. I specifically highlighted it. Miscalculations, divisions, marked offensive planning by US and Ukraine. Interesting headline, isn't it? But we will get back to it in a moment. And so the Washington Post continues to elaborate that future-proofing Ukraine against Trump. Okay. So they want to proof Ukraine against Trump, not against Russia. Good. Yeah, that tells you everything you need to know. And here they are. As the White House continues to try to persuade lawmakers, a second senior administration official emphasized that the strategy doesn't mean that the Ukrainians are just going to build their own defensive trenches and sit behind them all year. There is still going to be swapping of territory in small cities and villages with minimal strategic value. Okay, I will explain why I'm laughing. And then, rather than the massive artillery duels that dominated much of the fighting of the second half of 22 and 23, the West hoped for 24 that Ukraine will avoid losing any more territory. So now about this highlighted thing, and let me tell you, so this is very important. This is why people have to keep in mind what is going on, because sometimes even the lying sacks of you know what kind of substance, such as Washington Post, they do admit and they drop morsels of truth. And here we are. This is from December 4. It's a month and a half ago. Miscalculations, divisions marked offensive planning by US and Ukraine. Finally we admitting here that is what I am on the record, because the whole counter-offensive, so to speak, which they conducted was planned primarily in Pentagon and maybe in London with those, lap dogs who still pretend that they are not Chihuahuas, but Rottweilers. But hey, you know what? And here's the thing. Now they send there this General Aguta, and the guy is supposed to set up their strategic defense. I'll have news for you. Nobody in Pentagon knows what strategic defense is. If you look at any field manuals on any fighting doctrine, it is built on a single premise. We meet some enemy who is something like Iraq. We defeat it within the first. Usually the operational tempo is developed such way that to finish off the main forces within 40-45 days, with then entrance of the prior to this of the special services, with the basically organizing disintegration of the political system of the opponent, with all those Iraqi or Afghani Navalny's and whatever you have, all those dissidents and opposition, so. Well, the problem is, of course, they don't know how to deal with this, because the United States never was on defense, real defense. We're not talking about the situation with the Ardennes forest, but the point is United States has absolutely zero experience in strategic defense, because it's the science upon itself, which is a separate part of the military science. And so that does matter whose generals they're gonna send there. Guess what? Those generals the American generals, such as Mr. Aguta, he's 4-star or 3-star general, I believe, you can look him up. So they will be trying to copy what is called wrongly, not Surovikin line. It is actually Stavitsky line. And this was the guy, he is the guy who is basically in charge of the Russian engineering troops. And so this were the guys who were building strategic defense, to meet this counteroffensive. And the fact that the way it was planned, it seems like it was planned by amateurs who do not understand whatever the attrition models and how they actually adjust themselves in the real combat with the enemy, who is not only peer, pardon me, but who is probably above peer in some things which United States doesn't have, like air defense and the variety of the standoff weapons which no NATO countries or NATO combined can produce. But hey, here it is. And when you look at this, yeah, sure, Let them organize this defense. And they, everything is tied to only PR. When you look attentively even at the administration of Zelensky, it is primarily PR people, journalists, those communication specialists. They are all of making this picture, and selling it to the public. Guess why it has been done this way? Because when you look attentively today at the administration in the White House, and it's not only Biden administration, all administrations like this have been in the last, I don't know, very many years. It is primarily PR people, legerdemain, PR, selling BS, manipulating media, or just outright owning them. And as the result, you have this catastrophe. And no number of the DOD or Pentagon generals can change anything. And even those 60 billion, which eventually probably will be released, they're not going to change anything. They just not. I mean, they don't understand what modern war is, and they will try to learn. I don't think so they can learn it, because let me put it this way again, as basically the erection of this incredible monument and marking of the 80th or anniversary of lifting the siege of Leningrad, one of the major operations of the Red Army. So they are not part of American history, and you cannot buy yourself military history, no matter how you try. You can actually confabulate it, which was done because the United States wanted it. Stolen valor. They try to steal it constantly from the Soviet Union and Soviet people. And that the fact that they defeated Nazism, which is absolutely not true, they helped. And Russians, for example, eternally grateful for both Lend-Lease and, of course, glad for the Allies landing finally on the really where the war was happening, big one, in Normandy on June 6, 1944. By that time, the war was pretty much over. So, and when you look at this, so you cannot buy Leningrad. You cannot buy Kursk. You cannot buy the history of defeating Napoleonic invasion and defeating Napoleonic France and capturing Paris or capturing Berlin twice. You just can't, no matter how you try, no matter what kind of the PR tricks you do, like Hollywood. Hollywood, basically, you cannot buy it. So, and until they understand that military history of the United States on the 20th century, with the exception of the, of course, Pacific Theater, was primarily confabulated. They have to live with this, and they're not going to change. They're not going to learn anything. So, and they don't study it anyway. So, and it's too late now to study it anyhow. So, and this is what I wanted to tell you today, and that is why I started with this journalism thing, because this American journalism is a major tool of the influence and brainwashing poor American citizens who are facing today now a catastrophe in their country. And as always, guys, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford it, please buy me a coffee or two, or support me on Patreon. I will be really grateful for that. So, guys, have a nice rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.